My first video showed my proposal that the so-called schist disc and the Egyptian blocks known as levitation basins are used together for moving heavy blocks of stone around the site. The disc rotates on a pole in the center of the basin. Compressed air through the basin's holes pushes the disc round, generating a loud whistle. The compressed air generates its own lift like an inverted hovercraft. The sound generated by the disc is tuned to resonate with the basin and focuses the sound. The tone generated will be collimated like a laser. It will be a SASR, sound amplification by stimulated emission of radiation. See the link for a good explanation. The combination of air pressure and sound will produce lift that I will show can levitate a large mass sufficiently to enable it to be pushed along. The resonance is solely due to the diameter of the basin and has nothing to do with the crystals in the rock material. The levitation basins, these appear to have several variations. 1. Only one hole in the center of one side. 2. 3 holes within 90 degrees. 3. Cast with ribs round the top to strengthen the rim. 4. A plain shallow rim top. Basin top rim. The ribbed top rim is an indication that the basin has been cast, as this technique is used in mechanical castings today where strength is required but with a minimum amount of material. The basin with a plain shallow rim is more likely carved from solid stone. The center of the basin must have had a vertical axle to support the spinning schist disc. This axle is replaceable as it would get worn and may break. Obviously, all have broken thousands of years ago. How it works and calculations. The system is powered by compressed air through the holes. I shall first look at the basins with one hole. I can only go by estimates from photos as I have not seen the real thing. I estimate the basin to be 1 meter in diameter. The accurate resonant frequency will depend on the speed of sound in air, which depends on the temperature, humidity, and air pressure. The formula is F equals C divided by D, where F is the frequency, C is the speed of sound and D is the diameter of the basin or wavelength. The speed of sound at 20 degrees Celsius is 343 meters per second, therefore the resonant frequency is 343 Hz. 343 Hz is an audible frequency roughly like a whistle. To achieve this frequency, the schist disc must rotate at 20,580 rpm. This is quite fast but achievable with a good industrial air compressor. Basins with 3 holes. With 3 holes there will be 3 times the number of pulses per revolution. Each tongue of the disc will produce 3 pulses per revolution. With 3 tongues it produces a total of 9 equally spaced pulses per revolution. The holes would need to be spaced 40 degrees apart. 9 times 40 is equal to 360 degrees. This means the disc can go 3 times slower, which is 6,860 rpm. Scaled down version. My version is scaled down by around 4. It has a 24 cm diameter basin. This means the resonant frequency and speed is scaled up by 4. My original holes were spaced at 45 degrees apart, but I have re-drilled them to be 40 degrees apart. Polishing the basin adds to its efficiency. A speed of 82,320 rpm is required. This is where my scaled version fails. My amateur air compressor is not that good. I am only using one hole as I only have one air compressor. The best I can achieve is 7,539 rpm. I do not have the flow of air or pressure to meet the specifications, so I attempted to supplement the power by spinning the disc with an electric drill. Even with the drill I can only achieve 2,700 rpm. Even at low power the air compressor and drill together demonstrate significant sound. Proof of concept. My resources do not extend to making a full-scale working levitator. Even a scaled-down version is difficult due to the airflow that is required. However, a proof of concept is within my capabilities. I require as much airflow as I can make for the hovercraft effect and a source of the very loud resonant frequency. For the 24 cm basin, this will be 1429 Hz, which I can easily make using parts off eBay. The resonant frequency of 1429 Hz is generated electronically and output via a high wattage car loudspeaker. The test will use a paving slab representing the stone. The friction on top of the basin is measured by tipping up at an angle and seeing when the slab starts to slip. This is then repeated with the air compressor on and repeated with both air compressor and 1429 Hz tone. It can then be seen if the slab will be easy to push along. First, the basin is lifted with no air and no sound. I then mark the wooden post when the slab slips off, giving an indication of the friction between the basin and slab with no other interference. I then do the same test with compressed air to see how this reduces the friction and the slab slips off at a lower angle.
Okay.
The test is repeated with the tone generator. Finally, both tone generator and compressed air are run at the same time.
Keep going.
The power of the loudspeaker can be heard.
Okay, you can stop it now.
The friction with the 4 different combinations is shown. No air or tone gives the most friction, followed by tone only, then air only. By far the lowest friction is with air plus tone. We all know how air can lift objects such as a hovercraft. This test shows that with sufficient air and the addition of a focused tone, the lifting capability is increased. From my experiments, I can see that I would need a much higher flow of air and consequently louder tone to lift anything. Also, with a full-size basin, the resonant frequency would be lower and much easier to achieve. To use these, many basins would have been lined up as a track around the pyramid to move the blocks to any side. This lifting device, along with other tools such as large circular saws, drills, and grinders, would all be driven from industrial air compressors similar to the present day, as they will be working in highly abrasive wet sandy conditions. The parts of compressors can no doubt be found in the 30,000 plus items supposedly remaining in store in Egypt. The fact that the schist disc was found with a pile of small copper parts goes to increase the probability that electrical connections were part of the machine. Power for the compressor is provided by the pyramid itself. Generally recognized now by many people as doing 2 things: 1. The generation of high voltage electricity, 2. The distribution of that electricity. Generation is done in the stone arcs in the internal chambers. The side effects would be a lot of heat, gases, and possibly dangerous radiation. Hence the massive stone containment. Distribution is done by a very high voltage electric field with a very solid electrical ground provided by the base of the pyramid. The length of the causeway shows how far the general public would be kept away when it was running at full power. Tall obelisks spread throughout Egypt act like components on a giant circuit board, and control and equalize the power from the pyramid to spread it over a large area between other pyramids. It looks like the Great Pyramid was built in 3 stages. A small generator distribution system put in the lower chamber to provide local power when starting the build. The generator would then be moved up to the Queen's chamber using the entrance under the chevron. The final level was built perhaps years later, and the generator installed in the King's chamber providing power to a large area including high into the atmosphere for flying vehicles. The discontinuity up the southern air shaft indicates where the Queen's chamber roof was. See the following link, iceda-project.org/uput-project/. The other side of the roof would have been the Grand Gallery floor. As the final stage was built, the Queen's chamber shafts were continued up to a point where the electrical generator could finally be moved into the King's chamber. One unfortunate result of distributing electricity in such a way is that voltage would be induced in any metal object in the electric field. So, although simple communication would be possible using these waves, you could say goodbye to gadgets such as iPhones. It's definitely not free energy for today's civilization. In fact, the portable version known as the Ark of the Covenant had associated with it a rod and a staff which Moses used as high-voltage weapons with electricity supplied by induction, in his battles to smite his enemies. Hebrews 9 verse 4. Many high-ranking Egyptians are also depicted with their weapons around the ancient buildings. Thanks for listening to my ideas of how the pyramids were built. But of course, no one knows for certain yet. And the answers will not be found in the hidden chambers of a power generator. One thing we can say for certain is that delicate stone containers were not made using the hammers and chisels which are the only known tools found in the archaeological record. As a final note, it is interesting that similar concrete dishes were used during World War II as acoustic mirrors. See the link, romneymarshhistory.com/sound mirrors.